Support for this podcast comes from Smart Recruiters. Smart Recruiters is your all-in-one platform for faster, smarter hiring, making recruiting easy and effortless. Smart Recruiters are making some big changes, revamping their user experience, adding AI features, and refreshing the UI. I know from experience that they truly are a company that really values the recruiter and the practitioner. They understand the intricacies of the recruiting business, and this has always been reflected in their functionality and customer support. So, it's exciting to hear that they're making a bunch of updates. If you're ready to be part of the future of talent acquisition, head over to smartrecruiters.com and find out what they're up to. Trust me, your team and your future hires will thank you.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 654 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. Whenever we talk about recruiting automation, there's always a persistent narrative in favour of retaining the human touch in some way, shape or form. While technology now enables us to interact in increasingly conversational ways, there's still an irreplaceable quality in human-to-human, face-to-face dialogue that no machine or video can fully replicate. So, how can we enhance the effectiveness of our conversations in both professional and personal settings? And could asking more powerful, thoughtful questions lead to better hiring outcomes? My guest this week is Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Topaz Adidas, founder of experience design studio The Skin Deep. Having conducted over 1,200 filmed conversations exploring human connection, Topaz has gained profound insights into what makes questions transformative. In our discussion, he shares what his work has taught him about crafting questions that break down barriers and foster authentic dialogue. Lessons that can help us all engage more meaningfully in the workplace and beyond. Hi, Topaz, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Matt. Good to be here.
A pleasure to have you on the show. Please, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
So my name is Topaz Adidas. I'm the founder of The Skin Deep. We're a experience design studio. And for the last 11 years, we've, with our kind of flagship experience called The which is an Emmy Award-winning kind of documentary series that's on YouTube and all the social media channels. We've basically been holding the space for incredible conversations between all kinds of people for the last 11 years. So my team and I have had the privilege to witness incredible conversations, over 1,250 of them for the last 11 years.
Give us a bit more background on that. Why did you start doing it? What was the sort of purpose and what have you learned from it?
I mean, I was a filmmaker for many years, and then I realized I had a film that went to Cannes, and I thought, oh my God, I'm at Cannes. What more do you want? And it was after 2 years of being at Sundance, and I realized nothing really happened. And I put the film on Vimeo without a password, and it got picked up by Vimeo short of the week. And in a week, I had 500,000 views. And so it really, was a cathartic moment in the sense that it really, the question arose, what game am I playing? What game am I playing? Am I playing the game of putting films into theaters, or am I playing the game of injecting ideas into the mainstream? And if you want to inject ideas in the mainstream and have conversations, there's no better way than the digital form, because we're all using our phones now. And if that's the case, then you have to question, what kind of media do we make? Right? Because the experience of being in a theater or watching television or even the Netflix series, your option is binary. It's either you watch it or you don't. You change the channel or you stay on the channel. But when you create content for your phone, you have the opportunity to create things that are so much more engaging. You're topping on your fine left and right. It's unique, made to you. And so that basically led me on a path that I am now, which is really just focused on how are we all changing in lieu of the technologies that we're using. And that's been an exploration my team and I have been on for 11 years. We create different experiences. And as I said, kind of the flagship experience that's most successful, that won the Emmy, that has really been viewed by millions of people around the world, is the and, which really is about conversations and questions. And so a lot of my time now, the learning I've had by virtue of simply watching over 1,200 pairs in kind of interesting, cathartic, courageous conversations is a learning of what does it take to have conversations that deepen your relationship. And we could ask, why do you want to deepen your relationship? What's the payoff? Great question. What are the parts that involve to make it so? How do you do that? And I think in today's world where things are changing so fast and everyone's talking about returning to work, returning to the office, or is it okay to be remote? And what about AI? How's that changing? Fundamentally at the bottom of any business is human relationships. How are we communicating? How we communicate to each other as team members, and how we communicate to our clients or our consumers or our audience. And I think that is something that we and my team have gotten really good at. How do you create the space, and how do you inject that space with, catalysts to create deeper connection and deeper experiences?
Going to come back to AI and the workplace and everything that's going on in a second, but just, I suppose, to paint everyone a little bit of a picture of this, because I've watched a few of the conversations, and there's some amazing stuff there in the way that people talk to each other, ask questions, and those kind of things. What have you kind of learned from that in terms of how humans find out about each other, or how important face-to-face conversations are?
So I've learned a lot. I mean, I started this when I'm 37. I'm 38. I'm 48 now, and I feel that I have changed a lot in the way that I lead my team and the way that I communicate with my partner. I've learned a lot of things. One thing I've learned is the heart is made to love. What am I talking about? If you're listening, I'm talking about the fact that I sit there, I watch people in a room facing each other, asking and answering questions that I pose to them by placing it on the small coffee table that's between them as they face each other and have an hour-long conversation. It's almost like sitting in a therapy session, except there's no therapist. It's just two people in a space conversing. It's a very privileged position. It happens rarely in life that you get to watch other people's intimate conversation that explores a relationship. We've been privileged enough to see that, and we've learned is the heart is made to love. People at the end of the day want to connect with each other, but the heart has to find its way out of a maze of your personal trauma, of your personal, challenges that you've had, of the way you've shut down in the past, your own fears, your doubts, shame, guilt, to then find its way out of its own maze within your own system, your own patterns, your own values, out into the world, to reach across society's rules and values to another person and connect. And I just see that over and over again, that people have a yearning to connect. I think it's a fundamental human desire to be seen and to see. Everyone talks about wanting to be seen. What about seeing, fully seeing? There's a vulnerability in being seen. There's also vulnerability in fully seeing someone. And so I've seen that just over that there's a beauty, and that we are not very skilled at how to have these conversations, because what you focus on, you get good at. What you practice, you get good at. A lot of the content that we watch, it's all about speaking, not about listening. And what I've seen by all these conversations is that there's a way to practice and create the space in which we can have conversations, both speaking, sharing, but also listening and receiving, that can deepen and make more profound relationships, which ultimately amplify your life. It gives yourself a greater sense of fulfillment. Also, your relationships are more resilient. And there's a very simple computation. If we're just going to make this as a formula, Esther Perel, who's the relationship expert, and she's incredible therapist, relationship therapist, has written books and such. And she says, the quality of your life is commensurate to the quality of the relationships. Okay, that makes sense. Great. Well, then how do I have great relationships? One way I would argue is you have great conversations. Great conversations mean you have great relationships. Okay, well, then how do I have great conversations? Aha. My suggestion is, from what I'm finding, is two things. A, you need to create the space, and B, well-constructed questions. If you do that, you have the space, well-constructed questions, you'll have great conversations. Therefore, great conversations leads to great relationships lead to a greater life.
Perfect. And I suppose this is probably even more interesting in the workplace, where you've got this kind of extra layer of formality and expectation and everything that the way that people think they should behave when it comes to being at work. How does it translate to the workplace? What kind of lessons can people learn from this in terms of how they communicate with each other and have these conversations?
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, isn't it? The workplace, because there's a level of professionalism that's necessary. At the end of the day, you don't necessarily have to be friends with the people you work with because you're all there for your own livelihood, so that you're offering values and services to a market such that you can gain some type of repayment so that you can support your family and yourselves and the passions in your lives, right? And yet at the same time, we spend most of our time with the people we work with. So it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, there's a level of professionals like, we don't need to be vulnerable. We are doing work here. Why? Because it's our livelihood. But at the same time, we're spending a lot of time with these people. And so you can't just walk away from those relationships, right? Maybe you have a disagreement with a friend and you decide, you know what? It's not worth it. I'm going to walk away. Fine. That's a lot more difficult in the workplace. The payoff is a lot more direct. If you're not able to cohesively work with the people in your team, then your ability to success is more limited. So it's imperative that you're able to communicate in ways that are both professional, but also effective and deep enough such that you can take advantages of the opportunities that are around you in your business, in the workspace. And so I think it's a double-edged sword, right?
Give us some examples of the sort of specific questions or types of questions that you think are most effective for getting that sort of trust and empathy within people who are working together.
Well, let's take even before we get to the specific question, let's take the artifice of the question itself. If your colleague comes at work and says to you, "What do you love about working with me?" You're there working, they come, they knock on the door, they jump on the Slack channel, huddle with you, or they Zoom call, whatever it is, remote or in person. What do you love working about with me? Out of the blue. Are you thinking about why you love working with them? No. You're wondering what happened in their life that they're coming to you in this moment to ask you this question. Therefore, the space is not being created for you both to have that conversation. Now, if you have a very simple, for us, for example, I'm holding in my hand a box of cards, right? It's kind of our model. We sell these questions. And now, for instance, we have a coworker's deck. We have a team building deck, but you have a deck of 200 questions. Your work coworker comes to you, says at the beginning of a meeting or at a lunch break, "Hey, you know what? There's this cool product. Let's play a game." We open the box, we pull out a random question, and it says, "What do you love about working with me?" The box and the fact that the artifice that we're playing a game has created the space now so that you both are not wondering, you're not wondering why they asked you that question. We're playing a game. The question was random. It came out. Similarly, if you're in a meeting with your boss and your boss says, "Matt, what do you think we should be doing that we're not doing?" Okay, hold on a sec. This question is coming from my boss. I better, answer properly if I want to keep my job, or there might be an agenda. So you're not actually really thinking about the answer. You're thinking about the politics behind the answer. So there's a power play there. Who's asking the question holds the power. If you can remove the question asker into a randomness from a card game, it creates more space. Oh, we randomly got this question. So there's a power in that. I'm not saying it's always effective for do that. And it's also imperative that the leader of the meeting, or that we ask questions, well-constructed questions. That's imperative, and that's okay. But sometimes when you have a card game, it takes the power away, and it makes it more equanimity.
From a recruiting and hiring perspective, the place where it's kind of most obvious to ask questions are in things like job interviews, for example. And we're at this very interesting point where AI is starting to seep into that job interview space, in some cases running interviews, in some cases creating the content for interviews. What's the kind of balance here between machines and humans? And also, how do people create that kind of space that you're talking about to kind of have those sort of, have those hiring conversations?
Great. So I hear in your question 3 things. One is, how do you create the space? 2, how do you construct effective questions that really can explore the person you may or may not be hiring or you're doing work with, right? And the third one is, how does AI affect it? So first, in terms of the space, I think what we want to do with the space is articulate the intention, which is different than the agenda. The agenda is where we're ending up. The intention is where we're beginning. If you want to invite someone into a conversation where you're exploring and you actually get to know them on a different level, in a different space, not just the face that they're presenting to you for the work job, but actually get a sense of who they are, then you need to come to the space without the agenda of I need to end up here. We're not going to end up here where you're going to say this, and I'm not playing a chess match with you, chess game. And you know this. Sometimes people come to you and they ask you a question that you know they already know the answer to.
Which happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. I actually have all your details in front of me. I'm going to ask you about things that I'm actually looking at.
So then you're not having exploratory conversation. Then what we're doing, that's fine. There's a place for that. But then we're not having a deepening conversation. We're not having an exploratory conversation. We might not learn anything about our relationship or each other through this conversation. We're playing chess. Am I answering the question properly? Okay. But if you want to know who you're hiring and you want to get a sense of who they are, you need to create the space, which is saying, hey, we're going to have a meeting now. We both know why we're here. I'm evaluating whether it's a good fit for you are. So let's articulate. Our intention here is to get to know each other and see if it's a good fit, see what it is. I don't have an agenda in terms of where we need to end up. That is helpful because that creates a space of opening and curiosity. Now, how do we construct good questions? Here's 5 things. This is part of my book, 12 Questions for Love, but it can apply also to asking questions in the HR workspace. 1, don't ask any question that begins with is, are, do, should, or would. Is, are, do, would, or should. Why? Because no matter what words come after that word, is this the right job for you? Would you do this or that? Should you do this or that, or how? Right? Right? Are you interested in the workspace of this or that? Okay. All those, if you start with is, are, would, should, or do, your answer response will be a binary response. Yes, no, left, right. Yeah. But okay. And what information does that give you? Instead, begin your questions with what, how, why, right? In what way? How would you deal with this? Why would you do this? How do you feel about, right? Okay. That's 1. 2, what's always nice, especially in the HR space, is to ask questions that put them in each other's shoes. If you were in my shoes asking you a question right now, what's the question you want me to ask you most? Or what would you want me to ask you most? Or what do you think your previous direct report or would say was the most difficult thing working with you? So now they have to put themselves asking questions that put each other in each other's shoes different is really interesting. It shows you a sense of how aware are they of other people and their relations with other people. If that's important for the job at all. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's actually, you know what? I don't want, but asking questions that what do you think is the hardest thing being your colleague at work? What do you think people, Another one that's interesting is asking another version of that is putting each other in each other's shoes, but also asking questions that don't necessarily connect. 2 things connect so that it creates a space of a moment of pause and forces the mind to find an answer to it. Because the mind is always trying to find the answer. If you ask interesting questions, it'll just work really hard to find it. If you ask simple questions, it already knows the answer and you're not really finding something new. So what do I mean by that? Simple example would be, what does earning money cost you?
Yeah, good question.
Right? How does conflict make us better? What's the favorite lie you love telling yourself? What's the truth you hate telling yourself?
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Right. So that's helpful because that creates wait. Okay. Now I have to create 2 neural nodes, 2 ideas, just 2 disparate ideas and connect them and find a connection to them. And a reminder to everyone, listen, your mind is a faithful dog and it will chase any stick you throw. The stick you throw is the question. If you throw a question into the muddy pond, the dog will chase the muddy pond. It'll find the answer. Why did I get fired from my last job? Here's. Change the question. What can I learn from the last job that will prepare me for the next job? Or whatever it is. Construct. So what are we shaping the question so that that's at least another one is shape the question so you're getting constructive feedback. You can really explore something. And the last one is, and I'm not sure how this pertains to the HR space, but it's a nice play. It's a nice thing to explore, is asking questions that are connective. And why by me connective is that they acknowledge the people in the conversation. So if I said, Matt, what's your favorite dream job? Okay. If I ask you that and your best friend asks you that, and the barista at Starbucks asks you that, your answer will probably be the same thing. I want to be a football star or, soccer star or whatever it is. Regardless of who's asking, what's your favorite dream job? This is it. Okay. Now just make it connective, change the question. And now it could be like this. What do you think would be our favorite dream job we could do together? You will not answer that the same. If I ask it, if the barista asks it, and your best friend answer it, the answer will be different, right? If your best friend asks that, the barista asks that, and I ask that, it's 3 different people asking it. We have 3 different relationships. We have 3 different connections. So the question acknowledges the connection, and the answer inevitably will be unique to the people that you are in conversation with. So in the HR, you say, what's the hardest thing for you in the workplace? It's different. Say, what do you think will be the hardest thing in the working at this company? What do you think will be your biggest challenge working at this company, and why? What do you think we'll learn about you after 3 months of working here that we wouldn't learn otherwise, that will surprise us? What do you think you may learn about us that will surprise you? Right. So you're asking questions that acknowledge the people in the conversations and that make it unique. The answer is unique to the people involved in the conversation.
And bringing that AI bit in, how is that changing things, or what? What's the implications of it?
AI is going to do all the cognitive executive functions, physical or otherwise. It's just much faster than the human brain. It's going to get there in time. I think that's inevitable. I think the space then that bellies the question, what's unique about humans? What's our value offering? And our value offering is the fact that we can never be AI. We do not learn at the same rate. If you learn a Japanese word right now, I'm not going to learn in the same moment. If we were in part of AI nodes, if you learn a Japanese word, I would learn it immediately, and then boom, we're all learning at the same rate, everything. That's why it's so intelligent. But we don't. We have different learning rates. We have different perspectives. We have different ways of interpreting things. And that is actually our superpower. Because in the differences, in that disparity, we're not all the same. We do see things different. We learn at different rates. There's opportunity. And so then the question is, how do we converse in a way that we can traverse our differences and find the opportunities? And that's why it's important to create the space and ask well-constructed questions. So if anything, I think with AI, I think the quality questions is even more important than ever. So for instance, our team building deck, if you put into AI, okay, I have a team meeting and I want to ask 10 questions. They're going to spit out for you, because I've done this. They're going to spit out for you 10, 20, 100 questions. None of them find the 5, live out to the 5 rules or suggestions that I just went through. They don't ask one connective question. Maybe they will in time, but right now they don't. And in time they might, but then they don't also put 2 disparate ideas together, right? So shaping the question so that we can have an exploratory conversation so that the dogs of our minds can chase and find creative answers. That's a unique place for humans and humanity, in my point, in the world of AI.
And I suppose another sort of unique aspect of humanity is the ability to build connections when we're sort of face to face. Now, increasingly, as we work, we're not face to face. We're talking on Zoom or Teams or whatever that might be. How do we deal with that? How do we make sure that we're still having those connecting, authentic conversations in a kind of a more sort of digital format?
Bottom line, conscientious. We have to be conscientious. What do I mean by that? If you're meeting in person, are you conscientious of the fact that you're meeting in person and it's a different engagement than if you're meeting on Zoom? Let me give an example. In Zoom, you have a 25-person meeting. Everybody is framed like you and I are framed now. 3 buttons, it's called 3-button shot. It's 3 buttons down your shirt. So you basically have like above your pecs to your shoulder and your head, and everyone is in that kind of medium close-up. The world of cinema, so medium close-up. You have 25 people on medium close-up. In a physical room, that is a physical impossibility. If we had 25 people in a room sitting around in a circle, the person I'd see in medium close-up, meaning I could see their micro gestures on their face, would be the person sitting to my right and to my left. The person sitting across the circle from me, I'm sitting him in the full shot. I could barely really see his face, full face. So actually on Zoom, the fact that I can see 25 people at the same distance, which is a physical impossibility, is a great advantage because there's a certain type of, it's not physical proximity, but the framing and our reading of the gesture is the same, right? Now, in real life, in physical reality, now here's a difference for Zoom. So what I'm saying is you need to take advantage of the platform or the space you're in, if it's physical or not, and make do with that and be aware of the tools we're using. Because I think asking either or is just, it's not a good question because it's inevitable. Some of us will be working in person. Some of us will be working remote. It'll be a blend of the two. But in the physical space, for instance, which you don't get on Zoom meetings or remote meetings, is that you're sitting in a room and you see the people you're meeting with, the person you're meeting with, walking into the room. So it's kind of what I call like a defreeze. You know, you're warming it up. You see them at a distance. They walk in. Hey, how you doing? There's a warm up. There's a warm up physiologically when they're 20 feet away or at the door and then they come to the desk, right? Whatever it is, there's a warm up. There's also a cool down. The meeting's over. Small talk, goodbye. They walk out the door. You see them kind of disappearing. Now in the Zoom room, you don't get that at all. It's like turn on, turn off. There's no warm up. There's no like warming up or defreeze. And then there's also not like a finalization, like a landing the plane. So in the Zoom room, bring that into the space. When everyone like create a moment where people can all arrive together. So in the physical space, you can't get 25 people all together, but there's other advantages of having a sense of connection. So you use the physical space to your advantage, much like we should use the Zoom space to our advantage.
No, that makes perfect sense. I always like to finish with a question about the future. So what do you hope the future of human conversations in the workplace is, which, reflecting on it, is would seem like a ridiculous conversation 10 years ago, but a ridiculous question 10 years ago, but maybe it's kind of relevant now with all the technology and the automation and all those kind of things.
I'm not sure what you're hearing in your field, but what I hear in my field a lot is about curiosity. And I think it's true. And I think in your field, maybe you hear about curiosity a lot. Be curious and ask questions. Okay. So at this point, it's almost cliched. I think it's about listening. It's about listening to yourself to know what is it that you want to know about the other, posing that question, and then listening to the response. And I think the more we can all practice listening, the more we can create the space for each other to be who we are. And from being who we are, we can be more successful in the workspace that we have.
Topaz, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate you.
My thanks to Topaz. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.